So, Mansi and I are excited to have this conversation about beauty culture today. And I'm accompanied by my lovely 14-year-old daughter, Felicity.
Hi.
She wanted to just kind of chime in with some of her own thoughts and experiences. So, Mansi, how did you want to get started with our chat today?
Well, I will first of all say if you were on the other stream, which is scheduled as a live, that's not happening because my camera was not being recognized by Substack. So Jeannie graciously offered to host. I had it set up as me as the host, but Jeannie is the host, but both of us are hosts really in this conversation. And we've been having a lot of offline conversations, Jeannie and I, as you know, she's a mother of three beautiful daughters and I'm a mother of one beautiful daughter. And what do we define beautiful as? And I had written a blog post about my fitness regimen and how, I feel very um, judged in the society that I live because I show up like this without any mascara or like this is me every day. I don't have blush. I don't have lipstick on. I go by the premise of basic human hygiene is good enough because if it's good enough for a boy, it's good enough for a girl. But that's not how society shapes beauty and the conversation around it. And so Jeannie and I had some offline conversations, and then we thought, hey, this may be a good broader conversation to have with the community and have you all chime in and see where you're coming from. I will say this is going to be organic. We haven't prepared any kind of like back and forth question answer routine. It's just a conversation between two moms. And thank you, Felicity, for joining us to share your viewpoints as well. I will premise this with please know if we sound judgy and opinionated, it's coming from our personal lived experiences. We're not here to tell you what you're doing is wrong. We're sharing what we think beauty is or should be, or what we aspire for our children to learn about beauty.
Yeah, thank you for the caveat, Mansi, because I was thinking a little bit more about this last night. And I was thinking, everything's so nuanced. And sometimes it's a case by case situation when we're talking about anything from makeup
Yeah.
to Botox to dyeing your hair to the choice of clothing and jewelry. I mean, that's such a personal decision. And sometimes there are some really painful reasons why someone would choose to have like duck lips or a cheek lift or something.
Mhm.
That I don't have that type of experience. I don't come from that background. And so I'm not going to speak into that specifically, but I am going to acknowledge that there are circumstances that would totally warrant one person deciding to alter their face or their body in
Yes.
a certain way. I just personally don't I can't speak into that. So I don't want anyone listening or watching to think that, just like Monzi said, that this is kind of like a panacea, it's a universal application. That's not what this is about. This is more about we're trying to dive into some of the complexities surrounding beauty culture and its impact on us as women and also our daughters. So, Monzi, I was really piqued by that particular story that you shared because I live in the Midwest
Mhm.
and the environment in which I live, there are pockets of that type of, I'm going to say bougie living, but it's not prevalent everywhere I go. So it's
Mhm.
more common for me to be able to go out and about in my neighborhood, to the grocery, to any kind of public place, and not feel that pressure to
Mhm.
conform to this particular ideal of what I look like or attractiveness. And so I was really interested by the fact that you were saying that this is like everywhere, that you're like swimming in the waters, that you're kind of, you know, so I kind of want
Yes.
to hear more about that and what that's like for you and Mira.
Well, it's interesting because, I thought I had escaped that. So I'm going to preface this with growing up in India and the Indian culture. And I'm not speaking for all Indians here. My lived experience as an Indian growing up in India, as a pretty girl, I had really long hair. My hair was down to my knees. I was groomed in a way that you have to attract the right kind of husband to have an arranged marriage. And for that, you need to look pretty. And so there was a focus on let's get you braces because the dentist suddenly decided we didn't go routinely to a dentist. We only went when, our teeth hurt, if there was a toothache. And so I remember my mom was having some surgery done and I accompanied her and the dentist looked at me. I was in college, first year of college at that time. And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, she's got rabbit teeth. She's going to have a hard time. You guys aren't thinking about like how this is going to affect her suitors." And my mom looked at me and she's like, "What should we do?" And the dentist said she should get braces. And so that's the kind of hyper focused culture I grew up in, where your physical appearance was everything. There was a high value put on it. And you couldn't, like, we had night clothes, we had day clothes, we had house clothes, we had grocery shopping clothes, we had, of course, party clothes, going to the neighbor's house clothes. The number of outfit changes I still remember my mom putting me through, depending on who we were visiting or where we were going to run errands. It was suffocating. And then for people to say, "Oh, but you didn't have to dress up. You're so pretty anyway." And I'm like, getting all these mixed messages too. And you grow up in that environment thinking, how much of this affects me and my worth? Who am I? If I'm not beautiful, who am I? And then because I was the pretty one, it was always, I always felt victimized by it because I was also, in India growing up in that time. I don't know how much safer it is now, but at least when I was growing up, I used to drive a scooter. I had a kinetic Honda, which is like an electric scooter. And I used to drive to school and they're stopping at a red light. There would be motorcyclists who would just reach out and grab my breasts. And I don't really have a big bosom, but I was pretty. And so for me, that felt like a cage I was trapped in, my body that looked pretty on the outside. And so when I came here, I actually came to Iowa. That was my first landing in the US was Iowa. And so the Midwestern culture, people are just, casual and free. And you go out to Walmart in your pajamas and nobody like bats an eyelid. Nobody's looking at you. What? You're not wearing your grocery shopping clothes? It's just like you could wake up and go with messy hair. It was so liberating and so freeing. And so I thought I escaped, finally, all that judgment, all that burden, that gray cloud hanging over me at all times, looking in the mirror, second glancing at myself in reflections on windows, like, do I look good enough? Do I look appropriate enough? All of that. And then I come here to Los Altos, where we live now. You cannot go to a yoga studio without having the proper garb on. You have to have Lululemons. And if you don't have, like, they look at you if you're, wearing leggings from Costco, which is what I have. And you have to have the perfect sports bra and you have to have like the perfect physique. And there's so much emphasis on how you look. Even at curbside pickup, you see women with false eyelashes. And these are women, in power business suits working at high profile exec jobs. And yet there's that's not good enough. You have the job title, you have a high powered, position, a title, but you still have to do that. My husband, on the other hand, Mira and I joke about this. She's 11. That daddy just wears his jeans and t-shirt and he's off. And he will wear the same thing, whether it's, to a high profile VP meeting or if he's going out to Starbucks. It doesn't matter. So
Subtopic.
it's, yeah, it's easy. It's easy. And the thing about basic hygiene, and that's where kind of she and I have landed, is that as long as you smell clean, you look clean, maybe your hair's combed, maybe it's not, and you're wearing clean clothes.
Right.
You can step out of the house. It's fine. I just don't want you walking around with lice and scabs. That's kind of the basic premise at this point. I don't have my nails done. I don't grow my nails because I get paint under my nails at all times. So these are things I noticed that, there's so much emphasis on, are your hands manicured? And she sees that, Mira sees that. And there are times when we do go out and I will start putting mascara on and she'll walk into the bathroom and she's looking at my mirror and me doing that, curling my eyelashes, and she'll go, "Is this an important meeting?" And I'm going, "No, I'm just hanging out with a friend for lunch." And she goes, "Why are you putting on mascara?" And that stops me because, it makes me question. So there's still something inside of me that makes me want to look pretty for my
Yes.
friends when I go out with them. But then I think about, well, does it make me feel good? Yes, it makes me feel good, but then another deeper layer that you peel away at, why does it make me feel good? What about putting mascara on makes me feel better than if I were to go to lunch without it? Why am I afraid? What does it feel like I'm naked? Like what is that mascara doing for me? And so I have scaled back a lot on because I used to do the makeup and the nail polish and the pedicure, manicure every week and all that. It was a job requirement at one point. I remember the VP at one of my jobs, this became an HR issue, telling me that I cannot walk around in a board meeting without the proper attire, the proper heels. They need to be 2 inches and without having a manicure
Wow.
because I need to look presentable because people will not take me seriously.
All of these things are reinforcing
Yeah.
the the implicit bias about what defines beauty, particularly for women, and especially in Western society. But it sounds like you had a lot of that grooming also growing up in India,
Yeah.
uh, which I know that I know some of your story, and that's really fascinating. I think there's a lot of like layers to what we're talking about. So I just wanted to kind of give everyone watching a little bit of background about me and then Felicity, if you'd like to add anything, what it's like today to be a teen girl today. So I never thought about my appearance at all until I was about 10 years old. And I just was a kid. I just enjoyed life. I didn't care what I wore. I wasn't picky about my hair. I did have glasses, and kids at school made fun of me for that. And when I got braces, they made fun of me for that, like train track mouth and four eyes. And um, that kind of put that lens back on me where I started to feel self-conscious. But it was really a particular pediatrician appointment when I was 10 years old that was pivotal for me. And I really started to internalize this shame surrounding my appearance. And it was just a regular wild child visit. And I remember the pediatrician talking around me to my mother and saying, well, she's getting a little pudgy. Make sure you watch what she eats.
Mm.
And so the whole drive home, I was like, I don't really know what that means. And I felt really uncomfortable and I didn't know what to say. And as soon as we got out of the van, my mom's like, well, I guess you just need to lose a little bit of weight and just don't eat so much. And that was like a huge
Mm.
shift for me because then I started to think, well, why? Like what's wrong with my body? And why does the way that it looks, why is it bad? Because I felt good in the body that I had. And
Mm.
um and from that point on, I was very aware of everyone else, all the other girls' figures. I listened, I tuned in, and I picked out how they were talking about themselves.
Mm.
So whenever I would go shopping with friends in high school, for instance, I was very hyper aware of them saying, "Oh, I'm not a size 0 anymore," or a size 2, and they'd be trying on these tight jeans and asking me how their butt looks in it, and I'm sitting with the yeah, like I'm sitting outside of the dressing room trying to cover my own middle because I was a curvy size 12. And I remember thinking even at the time, "Oh my gosh, if my friends think they're fat at a size 2 or 4 or 0 or whatever, what do they think of me?" And of course, nobody ever said outwardly, but that was the impression that I had. And being the shy, studious brunette, and where I had this blonde, bubbly best friend, everywhere we went. When we went to Virginia Beach on a vacation together for our spring break, when we went to the mall, it didn't matter where we went. People were always like drawn to her. Or they would come up to me and say, "Where did your blonde friend go? She's so hot." And so these were the messages I internalized that meant, "Oh, something's not right about me. I don't look like that, and I should, and I'm supposed to." And so I never really felt like just being in my own skin and embracing the face that I have and the hair that I have and the figure that I have was like you used the word, Mansi, worthy. I did not feel worthy. And so it really, really impacted my self-esteem. I was so struggling in self-confidence and um I allowed a lot of things to happen to me because I was afraid that I would lose the few friends that I may have had simply because I was the geeky, nerdy, studious kid, quiet, shy kid. So, Felicity, what's it like being a 14-year-old girl now when we're talking about beauty culture? What does that mean to you?
It's hard. It's like the people, they have standards. Like you have to be thin, you have to wear makeup, you have to do your nails, you have to have this beauty product. And I personally did not, like you said, like I never really worried about how I looked until I was in like 7th or 8th grade. And people kept telling me, "Oh, your hair is messy." Like, "Oh, I don't know." They're like, "Oh, you need to like talk more. Oh, you need to like be more beautiful, something like that. And I started focusing more on my appearance. And for a while, I just felt very depressed
Mm.
with I was who I was hanging out with because they wore makeup. They did pretty much everything and they talk constantly on social media. Oh, there's this new product. You need to try it. Oh, you need to do this. And I feel like social media too depends on the platform, but I feel like social media can also really be hard on teen girls because it it sends a message to them that says, "Oh, you have to look like this person. Oh, you have to wear like these clothes. Or if you don't, you're not pretty." Like stuff like that. And to me, I I don't listen to that. I personally think if you believe that sort of stuff, you're really insecure. And I think for a while I was that way too, but I've learned to accept myself the way I am. And to me, that has really also been helpful. But like you said before, with like boys calling people hot, I personally have had that experience where boys have called me that, but I feel like they're using me because they think I'm pretty. They don't want me for who I am. They just want me because I look pretty and I have blonde hair.
Yeah, so
And I have a pretty figure.
how does that make
all
you
they
feel when they say that?
It makes me kind of mad. Like for a while I was, "Oh, that's just so sweet. Oh, that's so nice. I can't believe they like me." And then after I thought about it, I realized they're using me. They don't want me for who I am.
And the word for that, Felicity, is objectification. Because I have felt objectified my entire life. My entire adult life, that's what I felt up until I became a mom and my body changed and I wasn't as beautiful anymore by those standards that you mentioned. And, that takes a toll on you because when you've always been the prettiest one in the room, like Jeannie was talking about her blonde friend, I was that blonde friend. I was the one people wanted the phone number for. And I hated that because I was like, they don't really want to get to know me. They just want my phone number because I look pretty. And then where does it go from there? Like what is the basis of that conversation? Do you even have a deep relationship with anyone who doesn't really want to get to know who you are, but they just go by what you look like? So
Yeah.
that's the thing, and it's a struggle. People, we always think about, and that's given me perspective because when Jeannie and I started talking, I think it was in another post where you were talking about how people feel marginalized because of how they look. The other extreme of that is how people feel marginalized because of how they look pretty. It's both ends. It's both ends. It's people who feel or look ugly. And then there's people who feel or look pretty. It's both ends. It's not like it's rainbows and unicorns on this end of the world either. Because it's not. It's not. Because everybody's like, oh, I want to be like her. She's so pretty. No, you don't. You don't want to get attention just because of how you look. You want people to get to know the substance, right?
Yeah. Because I was at school, everybody, all the boys I knew, they always called me hot and they always there was this instance where my friends were trying to hook me up with a guy they found, and they would start posting stuff like pictures of me on social media, and then I'd start getting called pretty by like people I didn't even know. And I liked it. But then after a while I realized they're using me. It's not okay.
It's not authentic, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I realized that you need a guy just wants you because you quote look pretty and fit all of the standards of society, I don't think he's worthy enough for you.
Good for you.
I don't think he's worthy enough for you. And there's a ton of guys, like I liked a ton of guys, but they didn't want me for who I was. So I realized they're not worthy.
I love that you have reached that at age 14. I wish I was you when I was 14. I wish I had that clarity and that confidence that you have because I didn't. And I don't know if you know, but I will tell you this. The man that I'm married to never saw my photo when he fell in love with me. He was here in Santa Clara. I was in India, in Lucknow, in my parents' house at that time. He found a poem that I had written. It had won an award from UNICEF. It was a very deep, dark poem, not like, fun and bubbly and all that stuff. It was a very deep poem, serious poem. And he wrote back to me and we started emailing each other back and forth. We only did emails. And then he started sharing his poetry with me. This was in 2001, where there was no Google. There was one thing called Yahoo Messenger, which was also fairly new at the time that we used. there was obviously no Instagram and all that stuff. And
Okay.
so we connected via words. And then a week after we had exchanged maybe like 300 emails, because we were both prolific writers, he said, I think we ought to spend our life together. And when I first saw him at the airport 2 months later, I looked at his face, I turned around, and honest to God, I said, what did you do? Because he looked absolutely nothing like I had imagined he would look. He was this dark faced, scraggly, looked like a refugee from Somalia, like undernourished kind of person with Elvis Presley sideburns. And I'm like, oh, hell no. But then, as soon as he approached me, and he said, hey, there you are. And I said, there you are. And we started talking. It was suddenly like that didn't matter because looks wasn't the basis of the relationship. And so for me, it was a huge validation that he didn't care for he hadn't seen how I looked. And obviously when he saw me, he was like, I hit the jackpot because you're so pretty. And, it was like, why would you say that? But also we knew each other in a very different way. So when a boy calls you hot, it's that ambivalent feeling of, oh my gosh, he thinks I'm hot. But what does he know about me?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. So as I'm hearing the two of you talk, it's putting in perspective some of the experiences that I had when I did start dating because I knew that the guys actually wanted to get to know me, that they were to my mind or my heart. And um, some of the other physical attributes came later, like, oh, you have beautiful eyes or something like that. But that wasn't the primary motivator for why they decided to ask me out. It was because they were intrigued by something, a conversation we had,
Mm.
or the depth of that connection, I guess. And so that's interesting to hear both of you because I had a very different experience. And everyone listening probably is aware too that Felicity has a younger sister, Sarah, who so our second child, Sarah, was born with a rare genetic condition called Apers, and it affects her face. So her face looks different. And I think that that's another reason why I've taken a lot of time in the last 10 to 12 years to really think hard
Mm.
about the messages and the modeling when it comes to beauty. And we all have there's these tropes that we grow up hearing, beauty is in the eye of the beholder and all these things like that. And I think that most of us can kind of accept the surface value of that. But when it comes to our lived experience going out in the world, it's very, very different. And so, Felicity, I'm going to ask you in just a minute, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about Sarah, and then I'm going to ask what it's like for you. So, I know Sarah and I have started to have some hard conversations because she's 12 and she's becoming more aware of her difference, her facial difference. But when we have been in public, there have been occasions where people, usually younger kids who don't really know and they don't have a filter, will say things like, why do you look like a witch? Or your face looks like a monster. And of course, it's deeply hurtful, just like red teeth, Mansi. Like that really hurt my heart when I heard that that's the way that your teeth were described. And there's the specific language that is used around beauty culture. What is beautiful and what is ugly? And it always centers around appearance. And I guess I'm thinking more about that because I came across a quote or something when I was still on Instagram, and it had to do with this concept of body neutrality. And
Mhm.
really drawn to this for a couple of reasons. One, because I'm raising girls, and also because I want to model and teach to my sons that
Yes.
respect women and how to really get to know them and not make these catcalls and these really disrespectful misogynistic comments that are perverted and depraved. So the concept of body neutrality is, we have this kind of aversion sometimes to the way we look, and we tend to be self-deprecating, commenting about, oh, my wrinkles in midlife, or oh, I have, gray hair right here and my temples, and I have to wear glasses, etc. I have saddlebags, all these things. And then the pendulum swung to this whole movement towards body positivity. Well, I'm just going to embrace everything that I love about myself. I don't care if I have pock marks on my face. I don't care if I have a big tummy or a big butt. And the concept of body neutrality is simply to accept the reality of how you feel in the moment. Like, you don't have to love your pock marks and your gray hair and your wrinkles, but you accept that that's who you are in this moment. And that's part of aging, and it's part of your growth, and it's part of your maturity. And it's a true reflection of you. You don't have to love it, but you don't have to hate it. And so I really appreciated, it was very refreshing for me to hear this concept of, well, we don't have to like totally love or totally hate. We can just accept. There's somewhat of like a surrender or an embracing of the personhood, the total personhood of who we are.
And it doesn't have to feel like a loss. When people say the word surrender, it usually evokes the image of we're settling. You're not settling. As you're talking, Jeannie, what you're saying is we're human beings. This is how we are in this moment, and this is how we feel. And I also appreciate it. I don't mean to cut you off, but I don't want to lose this thought too.
Right.
About raising sons in a way who are respectful and are not, shallow and surface level when it comes to how they view women and girls. Because there is responsibility there. Beauty culture is not just a conversation to be had amongst women. It's a conversation to be had amongst people, humans, however they identify.
Yes. So, Felicity, can you talk a little bit about what it's been like for you growing up with Sarah and seeing how she's been treated and how that makes you feel? And
Well, it definitely has been hard. I would say lately she has been, I feel like, accepting herself, and I'm really happy for her. But when I was younger, when she was younger, I would be with her in places. I would hang out with friends. She would just kind of play by herself or with our siblings. And people would come up to her. They would say really mean things to her. And I would try to say, hey, that's rude. Don't do that. Like, don't say that. Um, but they wouldn't like listen. And she would definitely like run away, and she would cry and stuff. And I felt really bad. But at the same time, what I have learned is that I think just because you are different does not mean you are pretty. Like, I think that we need to we need to accept people who are different. We need to tell them they're beautiful. It does not matter if they look different. We should just tell them how wonderful and worthy they are. And we need to start doing that. And I feel like especially in our culture, people don't do that. Um
Yeah.
and
I think you have a unique perspective from what you shared with me in junior high. A lot of times there would be students in your class, your peers, who would get picked on for certain reason. It wasn't always the parents, but or you would overhear a conversation where somebody was making fun of someone with Down syndrome or something like that.
yes,
And Felicity would always chime in. I think that gives you that perspective because you have a sister.
yeah, one thing that I did realize is I was in class and there were these kids watching a dumb video making fun of people with Down syndrome. I was so mad. I was so mad. I told them, I was thinking to myself, why are they doing this? This is hurtful. This is absolutely rude. This is absolute trash. Like, why would you make fun of somebody who's different? They're beautiful human beings and they deserve to be loved.
So, Felicity, I cannot. I mean, Jeannie, you're doing such a phenomenal job raising these humans in your household. And Felicity, it's so validating to hear in person from you, in first person, what you're experiencing and how you're standing up, not just for your sister, but for other people. And I will tell you this, that Mira and Sarah are pen pals. And what Sarah has done for Mira, so Mira saw a couple of Sarah's videos and then she decided, I want to be pen pals with her. And it's just these two are made for each other. Mira's been making stickers for Sarah because Sarah loves a sticker collection. And Mira doesn't have stickers. She doesn't have a sticker book. So she kept thinking about it for 2 days when she got Sarah's last letter. And she's like, I'm just going to make stickers. And I was like, how do you make stickers? We don't have a sticker maker. She's like, I'll figure it out. And so she's been sitting with parchment paper and there's tape at her table right now I'm looking at. And she's been sketching out things and coloring them for Sarah. But what I'm going at with this is the kind of bond they're forming via mail, communicating with each other, has given Mira a sense of confidence in herself And she relates with Sarah at a much deeper level. She doesn't look like Sarah. She doesn't have Apert syndrome. She has been picked on for being dark skinned. She has been identified as being a brainy person because she's Indian and she's expected to be good at math, which she's not. And so there's, layers of that. And she is hairy like me. I was bullied in school when I was in middle school. People used to call me Bhalu, my classmates, and Bhalu means bear. And they would joke about, oh, she doesn't need to wear warm clothes. She has a whole layer of insulation on her body because I had a lot of coarse hair. And the turning point for my mom, not for me, I was like, whatever. But my mom, I still remember lounging one evening. They were drinking chai, and I was in shorts, it was summertime, and my dad jokingly lifted a strand of his leg hair. I still remember this so clearly, reached out to me and picked up a strand of my leg hair and said, they're almost the same length. That's very cool. And I laughed, and he laughed, and my mom was like, we need to get you waxed. And I'm going, what? I actually ran away from my first waxing appointment. That's another story. But so Mira has that, and she's heard my stories. So she doesn't care. She will wear shorts to school because she's like, yeah, if somebody says your legs are hairy, she'll be like, yeah, your legs are hairy too. Everybody has hair. What's the big deal? So she's kind of, because of the stories I've shared with her and because I have been upfront about, I'm not perfect. I don't aspire to be this Greek goddess, statue who's like Aphrodite. I don't aspire to be that. And we're all human and we are all insecure and all that stuff. But for Mira, what Sarah has done is give her so much confidence because Sarah is so confident in who she is and because she's nurtured and she has the scaffolding that you guys have built for her. Mira sees that. That's what she sees in Sarah, is a very confident young girl who embraces everything that she is and spreads kindness. And that's who Mira wants to be. So Sarah is a role model for her. And she doesn't care how Sarah looks. It's not about that at all. And every time we get a letter in the mail, Mira always appreciates Sarah's handwriting. And it's never, oh, but her hand is like this. How does she write? It's not that, none of that. She sees past that. And I think that's what we need more of, is what you're saying, Felicity, too, is get past that first impression, that layer of skin, and see what the heart has.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, I feel like, especially in our society does not accept that. Like,
Yeah.
they will judge people on looks, how they look.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard so many stories, and this makes me so mad. I've heard so many stories of people with different skin tones who get made fun of, who are just rejected, and it just makes me so upset because they deserve so much love. They do not deserve that much hate. They deserve so much more.
How do we change that, Felicity? How do we change? How do we affect that kind of change? Because you guys are growing up. It's not just about in-person interactions. It's also about how social media influences, because all of you teenagers are on there and that's not going away. So how do we change that? And how do we support that change as mothers?
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to start, because sometimes social media, like who we follow, can impact on us, like has an impact on us. So I would unfollow anybody who is judging other people for how they look, judging other people on their race. Unfollow them. They're not worth your time. And instead follow people who are positive, who are self-accepting, and start posting more self-accepting and self-worth content instead of just posting like, oh, this is how I look today, like get ready with me and stuff like that. Like, post something that is validating. Like, post something that really, really nurtures other people and makes you feel confident. That's what I would do.
Good for you, Felicity.
I used to follow a lot of people who did like a lot of beauty and makeup content. That made me so depressed. So I unfollowed all of them. And I started following people who made me feel like I was worth a lot. Like, they made me feel like I was worthy. They made me feel happy. They made me feel more confident. And I'm going to try to start posting more motivational quotes, self-love quotes on social media because I think that the change starts with us.
Yes. That's great.
100%. Yes. Yes.
Public speaker that I had
Yes. See, you do have she needs to have her own Substack where she does these Substack lives for people. I don't know if you're old enough to have your own, but definitely you should consider that because I think the messaging, it does need to start from us and the messaging does need to be on point and very direct and call this out because a lot of people will skirt around the issue, will not call it for what it is, will not be brave enough to use the words that we're using in this conversation today and really saying, hey, this is not okay.
There's another thing I wanted to mention that I had forgotten, going back to the concept or the definition of body neutrality. And it's the fact that our appearance is not the most important thing about us.
Mm.
And I remember when I read that, I was like, that's right. And that's really essentially what you're saying, Felicity, is that we follow people or if we befriend people who demonstrate that the most important thing about us is essentially who we are, not how we look, then that's what's going to slowly start to change this trajectory of conformity in appearance and this sort of the pressure that's placed upon us and that we also feel we have to conform to when
Right.
it comes to all of these things that we're talking about. So I love the fact that if we really think about who someone is instead of how they look, and then also we have to be careful about the language that we use when we're speaking about ourselves. And that's another thing that me as a mom, particularly of daughters, I have learned to be more cognizant of. Like, how am I speaking about myself? And so I don't ever talk about weight. I don't I don't talk about how I feel like I'm ugly or I'm having a bad hair day. I really avoid talking about my appearance almost all the time. And just like you were saying, Mansi, I don't dye my hair. I don't really wear makeup that often. Once in a while I do, like if I'm going to a wedding or some special occasion. But generally speaking, I just want to be able to model to my children that for me as a woman, I can be who I am and I don't have to constantly be scrutinizing my face or my body or my clothing or is it a brand name or all of these different things that I think communicates in subtle ways to our children and thus to the culture at large that those are what that's what's important. Instead, what we talk about in our family, and you can chime in if you want, Felicity, in a moment, but we really tend to focus in our conversations around our values. What do we value? Is this respectful? Is it kind? Does this need to be said? How do we say it? How do we deal with conflict? What do we do when we see an injustice happening in front of us? How do we speak up? How do we know when to be silent? How do we know the timing of a conversation, the tone of voice? So these are kind of like what I like to think of, and maybe it's the school counselor and me talking, but these are kind of like these life skills, these soft skills that I'm seeing a paucity of. I mean, I do not see even among adults using exercising these kinds of skills that when I was younger, I think at least in my memory was a little bit more commonplace. And now there's a lot more violent language. There's a lot more blaming, criticizing, judging. There's a lot more placing people in solid containers or labeling, binaries. I mean, there's a lot of these things that I think are very dangerous in terms of the language that we use, the way that we speak about ourselves and the way that we speak about each other and to each other. What do you think about that?
I find that, yeah, I find that true to be true because if you say hurtful things to people, it is going to make them feel like they are not loved, like they are not good enough. And to me, that's very damaging because I've had a lot of experiences with people who have said really hurtful things to me and have damaged my spirit. It has made me feel like I will never be good enough for them. Well, who cares what people think? Because if you accept yourself, then and you show people how to accept themselves, they're going to want to, I feel like, be around you more because it's not about appearances. Your beauty is from within. It is not how you look. And I find that hard, especially in our culture today, because especially with makeup, there's a lot of a lot of girls I knew had a lot of makeup products that they would bring. And the impression that I got was if you don't have it, you're not beautiful. You're not good. You're not cool. And to me, that's just hurtful. Like, so I started buying that I felt like I had to have, that I, and I felt I put on makeup because I put on a lot of heavy makeup so I could make other people like me. But then when I learned to let go of that and I started wearing more natural makeup and I learned to accept myself, I learned that that just was so freeing for me. And not everybody wears makeup, I get it. But I feel like you don't have to wear makeup to be beautiful. It's from within.
What do you think, Mansi?
100%. Well, I have a couple of thoughts because I do the exact opposite of you, Jeannie. I actually talk about stuff. The self-deprecating talk, I do say that out loud. Like I'll wake up and my hair is very thick and I don't use product. And so sometimes I'll wake up and it's just standing and there's nothing I can do. The only way I can get rid of it is by washing my hair. And that doesn't happen before school drop off. So for school drop off, I am going with hair like that. And there will be days when I will wake up and I haven't seen myself in the mirror and Mira will see me and she'll be like, "Oh, hello, have you met your hair today?" And I'm like, "Oh, is it doing that thing?" And she's like, "Yeah." And so when that first happened, I think sometime 2 years ago, I remember her saying, "Are you going to drop me off at school like this?" And I said, what's with this? And she goes, "With you looking like this." And she did that. And I was like, first of all, don't ever do this to me. And yes, this is how I look right now. We need to rush. You're going to be late. Head out. But then later when she came back, I said, we need to have a conversation about this because I did look at myself in the mirror and I was like, whoa, but why am I having that reaction? That's what I want to sit with. And that's the conversation that I usually have with Mira is the going to the why. I will acknowledge that I have eye bags when I wake up. I haven't slept enough. But I will not use the eye gel thingies that people put or cucumber slices that my mom used to put because I'll just drink more water today. My body needs hydration. But those are the kinds of things we do end up talking about a lot. And the who cares thing that you said, Felicity, I actually do care. So as much as I put on that bravado and that front of who cares what other people think, I actually do care. And I have to be honest about owning that because it does hurt me. I do look at people judging me and I do, because I notice everything, the said and the unsaid. Mostly people will not say things to you, but they will look at you a certain way and you know that they're looking at you a certain way. You just know that look when it's a microsecond when they give you the up and down, And it does affect me. But I have learned, especially in the last 2 years, because I stopped dyeing my hair, that I care. I care deeply, but I'm not going to give them that power over me. I will still do what I want to do, but they don't hold the power over me. I will acknowledge that I'm feeling hurt by the way they looked at me or by something that they said to me, but that doesn't mean I have to change. So I can hold both. Both are true. And I have said that. I've said that to Mira too. We don't have to say, who cares if somebody says something hurtful to you? You do care. You do feel hurt by that. You do stand up to that. And she's also like me. She holds on to things and she thinks about it deeply. She reflects, she journals, we talk about things. And when I say hold deeply, she will hold on to something for a month sometimes. That somebody said, like, there are times when she won't braid her hair a certain way because somebody said, oh, that doesn't look good on you. Or, you should braid your hair on the left side instead of the right side, whatever. And I have said to her, it's okay. And you tried doing it on the other side, and that didn't feel natural to you. That didn't feel good to you. So why are you giving them that power?
Yeah. Yeah. I can.
Be you. Be you, and it's okay.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, when I was in 7th grade, there was this girl. She would tell me, "Oh, you need to fix your hair. Oh, there's this guy, he doesn't like he's mean he makes fun of you because your hair is messy." So for a while I tried to fix my hairline. I was worried about my hair. I worried, is it straight enough? Does it look good? And that was really depressing. I went through a phase where I hung out with a lot of girls who were constantly judging judging people, how they look. And that I got so depressed. Like I came home almost every day and I cried. because it felt
She did.
so depressing. And now that I'm starting high school and it's going to be a new experience, I'm going to start hanging out with people who love me for me. They don't care how I look, they just care about what's on the inside. And I realized I made that mistake in middle school to hang out with the wrong crowd.
I love that. You're filtering people out. I love that. And that's what we need to do is filter people out.
And I really appreciate, Mansi, how you gave this the other end of this conversation that, yeah, it's okay if we care. And it's okay if we talk about how we care because we're humans. Going back to that in the beginning of our conversation. So, what I try to do when these conversations, because they kind of naturally come up with mostly Felicity and Sarah when it comes to people, I just allow my daughters to kind of take the reins or take the lead, and that's kind of my natural in to talk about appearance or beauty and ask them questions and ask them what's going on in their cohort or their gen. Um, and then I just kind of deal with my own feelings about maybe I'm having a day where I don't really like the way I look. I just kind of deal with that on my own
Mhm.
because I don't want to constantly be spilling out even just like offhanded comments or under my breath. That's what I'm talking about is I know that those are covert signals to my children that I really don't like myself. And
Yeah.
I can have a bad day and I can be totally brutally honest about that. And sometimes I can not really feel like I look very pretty, and that's fine. I just generally want my children to be the ones who ask me, like, Mom, why is this so important? Or why did this person say this? And so Felicity and I had a lot of these conversations like that she's sharing with you now. And another thing that I thought about when you were talking, Mansi, was Sarah asked me last year out of the blue, she's like, do you know some celebrities who've had plastic surgery? Like, didn't Madonna and like Michael Jackson? Like, I said, yeah. And she's why? Why would anyone want to change their face? Why would anyone want to change the way they look? And again, I want to go back to the beginning of how you and I kind of laid out this caveat about this isn't a universal kind of generalization because I told Sarah, I said, well, actually, you've had plastic surgery. Oh, I have, really?
Mhm.
Terrified. And so we had a conversation about, okay, sometimes people need to have surgeries like you, Sarah, for medical reasons. And the doctors have also talked to Dad and me about wanting to help you look your best. So
Mhm.
aesthetic piece to this, that's not the word I use, but there's kind of a balance between what's medically necessary and what is also something that's going to bolster that person's self-esteem so they look the way that they want to look. And
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with that. Where I see kind of where I guess I feel heartbroken in a way, and I think this was kind of the thinking of Sarah, being a person with a craniofacial condition. Why would anyone want to change their appearance? To me, when we are so focused and obsessed with, okay, my nose or my cheeks, or I forgot to get this filler or this Botox or my turkey neck or whatever people say. And there's this way about us where we just can't let go of, yeah, I got the filler or the Botox, but now I have to get more. And it almost becomes like this body dysmorphia,
Yeah.
which is real, and it can be an addiction, correct? And that to me is really tragic because, in cases like Madonna or Michael Jackson, which were the celebrities Sarah and I were talking about at the time, it's very clear that their appearance has deviated drastically from their natural appearance. Now, does that mean nobody should ever get those things? I'm not saying that. Again, I'm not saying that. But what I wanted to be sensitive to, again, with the language that I was using in the conversation with Sarah, is she was saying, well, I like the way I look. I know that I look different. I know that most people don't look like me, and I'm okay with that. That was what she was telling me. I wanted to validate and affirm that while also explaining to her that sometimes people do get plastic surgery. And sometimes it's because they really struggle with something like maybe their whole life, or maybe they've been in a car accident and their face was all messed up, or maybe they were a burn victim and they need some facial reconstruction. So we do go through some of those scenarios. And I'm mentioning this to you and to all of you listening and watching because I really appreciate how Monty's giving this perspective, this realness. Like, you know what? I do care sometimes. And how we can talk about all of these things because all of them are valid, and all of these ways that we feel and our lived experience, we can hold them. Even if they're contradictory, even if they're conflicting, even if they fluctuate from day to day. And I think that the more that we can do that in our relationships with our children, with our loved ones of any kind, the more that we can actually come closer to what it means to live in an authentic way.
Yeah, and it comes down to the conversations that Mira and I ultimately every single time have about beauty culture, about products, about going on a sleepover and then being offered face masks because, you're 10 and you should put those on. Why? So Mira has started reading the ingredients on those things and she's like, but I don't know what is glucosamala, if I cannot pronounce that. My mother says I should put on like a bentonite clay mask if I need something for my skin. And I'm like, yes. But it boils down to the crux of the issue is insecurity. And everybody who says a comment or looks at us a certain way is doing it, they're projecting their own insecurities on us, and we don't have to hold it for them. That's their problem. That's kind of where we come down to. And Felicity, I will share with you what Mira's favorite comeback is whenever somebody comments on her appearance, her hair, her nails, her cuticles, because she doesn't care. But her comeback is one word with a question mark. And that's all she says.
I love that.
You're wearing a sloppy t-shirt, she'll go, and usually they don't know what to say because, they're not expecting to be looked in the eye and said, asked for an explain yourself. You said that to me, now explain yourself. I love that she has that confidence to be able to say, and I wish as an adult sometimes I was able to say that to people. And
Same. Love that. I think we should probably wrap up.
yeah,
Are there closing comments, Felicity and Mansi, that you would like to say?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Just be yourself. That's all I have to say is don't let anybody define who you are as a person. Just be you.
well, I'm
Well,
going to take away from this conversation what you said, Felicity, just be you, but also what Jeannie said about body neutrality, accepting the body today as it is in the form it is, because this body changes. I don't look anything like I used to look in my teen years or in my 20s or in my 30s. I will not look like this in my 60s and my 70s. So that acceptance of what this body, and this body does amazing things for us. So
right.
to be grateful for it and to accept and to embrace.
And to thank our bodies, to say thank you for all the things that I've put you through or the things that you've gotten me through in this life. There's kind of this corny concept or maybe cliched idea of what self-love is right now in our culture. And I think it really comes down to just being aware of all of the things, mind, body, and soul, that we've endured, and being able to say, wow, I've made it through that and here I am. And that is something to be said. That's resilience.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I love this conversation, Monty. It was so great to talk to you. And Felicity,
Same here. It's always a joy. And Felicity, I'm so glad you made time for this because your perspectives were so helpful.
agree.
Really.
Agree. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and we will post this to our friends who weren't able to join us today. So
Thank you for being here.
bye.
Bye.